Hello, FreightWaves friends and fans, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in to Tuesday edition here of FreightWaves Now, where we're bringing to you a couple of chiefs, a couple of cooks in the kitchen. We've got Dean Croak, Chief Insights Officer, talking to us about Easter eggs. What does that have to do with freight? Well, he's going to tell us. And we also have Anthony Smith making his inaugural appearance. He's one of our market experts with a specialty in just economics in general. He can connect to us the economic indicator of housing starts and what does that mean. So without further ado, let's talk to Dean Croak, who also is going to give us an update on what is happening around here on Freight Alley. We had a rail collapse over the I-75, I-24 corridor. What happened and what are the ramifications,
Yes,
Dean?
so about 11:30 yesterday, a railing came off the side of a bridge. We're not sure whether a vehicle hit it or not, but it came off and fell on a vehicle underneath. The driver was okay, so didn't sustain life-threatening injuries. Wow. But of course, the backup in traffic is substantial because where 24 and 75, where the split is, that's an area, that's kind of the epicenter of Freight Alley. And for us in Freight Alley, there's about 30,000 heavy trucks go through this intersection every single day. Yeah. So that means that all that freight coming out of the largest freight market in Atlanta, which is about 5% of outbound volumes, all of that traffic starts to bank up. Now it's clear and running northbound now out towards 24 and 59 south, so the road's moving. They do have a plan this summer to actually rebuild that area, but they're not planning to bring any of that forward. So sometime in the summer, there will be a building project going on there to fix all of that. Right now it's apparently safe. But of course for truckers on ELDs, any of that downtime in traffic means you're burning minutes. Yeah. And truckers generally think of the United States as having two seasons, winter and construction. Because in construction season, when summer starts and the roadworks start out on the interstates, that's when you see major interstates down to one lane. You see all sorts of bridge constructions. There's, a lot of our bridges are in a state of disrepair. There's all sorts of issues going on with just infrastructure in general. So it was a pretty big deal yesterday, but luckily nothing bad happened.
I had heard about Chicago, it's winter in construction, but apparently truck drivers think about that nationwide.
Yeah, some of our bridges are so bad when you hit them in a truck, it feels like the front axle will fall out, because the difference between when you have the freezing and thawing of the blacktop over the winter, when it thaws in the summer, you get this sort of height variance as you go from the blacktop onto the concrete bridge, which is more stable, and you have this sort of double hit as you go on and come off. It just exacerbates the wear factor on airbag suspensions and things like that. Wow,
well thanks for that update, and glad no one, well at least someone got hurt, but at least it's not life-threatening. Can't wait for that construction to happen. Well, tell us, how do Easter eggs connect to, freight?
So important time of the year in the Christian calendar. We've got, we're in the middle of Lent, so we're in the 40-day fasting period. We're sort of heading towards the back end of that now. And what that means is that companies like McDonald's will sell about 25% of their fillets of fish during the month of Lent. So where does all the fish come from? It's Alaskan pollock, and it comes from the Bering Sea. And if you look up here, right up, you can't see the Bering Sea, but it's way out there to the left. A lot of that freight comes in off the trawlers. It's snap frozen on the trawlers, and it comes into the Port of Seattle and Tacoma and those ports. And what you can see up here in the top left is the refrigerated tender reject index. So these darker blue areas up through here tell us that there's capacity for refrigerated trailers to haul things like Alaskan pollock this time of the year is tight. These loads up here, about 45% of the time are being rejected by carriers, which tells us that if the tender rejections are high, capacity is tight and spot rates are elevated. So this area here is a high population area. It's pretty much a backhaul market most of the year. Right. But what's happening this time of the year with a lot of this seafood coming in from the Bering Sea, it's driving a lot of capacity demand for refrigerated trucks to travel over here. So remember, 25% of fillets of fish are sold during the month of Lent. So it puts an enormous amount of demand on refrigerated capacity.
Why are they eating so much fish during Lent?
They don't eat meat, I guess, is the reason.
Oh,
the main reason. So
it's good to know that it's real fish that they're eating. Absolutely. And not some kind of Frankenfish.
So that leads into the other part of this time of the year, which is Easter, which ends on the 21st. So what happens in the 3 weeks leading up to Easter and the week after, egg production ramps up in poultry farms by about 150%.
Wow.
It's also the time of the year when laying hens start to increase their activity because they're linked to the timing of light. So as there's more light in the day, the hens start laying more eggs.
Naturally, I see.
So the American Egg Board says that we'll consume about 3 billion eggs this Easter alone. So there's a huge demand for eggs, and what I've got here for you, Chad, is all of this area here is poultry region. So a lot of the poultry farms are along areas where there's water and grain to feed the birds, right? So what you see here is this is where a lot of turkey and poultry comes from, chicken, laying hens, and shell eggs comes from this whole area. And these blue areas tell us that refrigerated tender rejects are quite high. They're averaging about 45%, over 50% in some of the markets here like Joplin and Little Rock. But again, it tells us that with Easter coming and there's a higher demand for refrigerated capacity, what that means is in all of these areas that grow poultry and particularly produce shell eggs, there's a higher demand for that capacity. Carriers are rejecting a lot of the loads tendered into the market because spot rates are quite high right now.
So for reefer, all of this is
if you're a
about
refrigerated
reefer.
carrier in the Midwest, you can be coming out of these areas with some pretty good money on the spot market side of things today. So that leads into the other poultry region I wanted to focus a little bit on today, which is Grand Rapids.
Okay.
We've noticed a 20% increase in production in Grand Rapids over the last month. And what's happening up here is this part of Michigan is an area where it's sort of dominated by poultry farms here to this side. We've got automotive over on this side of Detroit. We've got a lot of poultry farms here in the Zeeland, Holland area. So we're seeing tender rejections up in the mid-20s today. So they can't get that refrigerated capacity out of there. Why is this area important? It's also an area that services most of the McDonald's egg capacity or demand. Really? So what you'll see, anything east of the Mississippi is you're probably eating a Michigan egg that comes from some of these farms up here. Egg McMuffins, for example, all come out of this area. So as we head into Easter, and sort of head towards Lent, what we're seeing is that a substantial increase in refrigerated capacity this time of the year. Tender rejections for most loads, that's how we measure capacity, is about 5% for all trailer types. So that means carriers are accepting about 95% of electronically tendered loads. What's happening in refrigerated though, because
completely different story.
It's like the tender rejection rate for refrigerated is 9 times higher than dry vans, which tells you something about demand for refrigerated capacity this time of the year. And of course, we've just come out of a very cold winter, which means that a lot of shippers have had to ask for no freeze freight requirements, which mean refrigerated trucks have had to keep freight warm. Right. And now we're heading into spring, so refrigerated trucks are required to keep freight cool. So refrigerated carriers kind of run for a pretty good profit this time of the year because demand is quite high.
Thank you. Fantastic. From pollock in the Bering Sea to chickens laying eggs in Grand Rapids, we're putting it all together for you and how it connects to reefer. And now we're going to talk to market expert Anthony Smith about what is happening with housing starts. So welcome to your inaugural appearance here, Anthony.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell us what are we looking at? What have you pulled up? Total housing starts is our index, and we're looking at this. Is this nationwide, and you're cross comparing it?
That's right.
With some key market areas.
Total housing starts, and we're comparing it to single family and multifamily housing starts. Right here in the blue, we see we have total housing starts, which ticked down in the latest month, February here. So within total housing starts, we see that there was a recent rise here in the orange line, which is multi-family housing starts.
Okay, so the national total is the blue line.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so there was an uptick, so multi-family housing starts makes up a smaller total of the overall trend. Single family, which is going to make up around 70% of overall housing starts, is not quite seeing that growth just yet. So.
And that's the one that's down 15%.
That's the one that's down right here in the green line. So there are a few constraints happening right now within the single family housing starts. That's going to come from limited labor, which is also going to start to drive up some of the prices that we're seeing there. And that's really going to constrain some of the housing opportunities for entry-level homes, even though we're seeing some positive conditions overall, especially with lumber prices and material costs being relatively low. Okay. On the flip side, we're seeing that even though material costs are a bit higher for multi-unit starts, things like steel, there was a recent uptick. Now, this 1 month here of movement for multi-units isn't indicative of a trend, but it is something certainly to watch and keep an eye on in the coming months.
Why? So right now it's a tight labor pool. Are there other headwinds that are forcing things kind of downward? With costs being low, it would seem positive, right?
Another constraint that we're seeing right now is limited area lots and zoning for construction for that to build those single-family homes. And really that's going to start to drive up prices a bit more and really going to kind of put a constraint on entry-level homes for many buyers. So something that we did see in the more recent month of February was an uptick in existing home sales. And so this was a strong month for existing home sales. And so that's kind of mirroring that there is some pent-up demand coming online here. And that can really kind of start to spur some growth with remodeling activity as well.
So this is definitely an inhibitor to the overall economic health of our country. So are you predicting maybe because of pent-up demand and entering into the summer that things will continue to trend up, or is it too mixed of a picture?
It's a very mixed picture right now, and I think the general outlook is that there are catalysts for growth going forward in the second quarter of 2019. Some of those catalysts would include the expectation of improved weather conditions going forward. Yeah. Also expectations that there will be improved employment conditions for putting these houses online. So the expectations is positive, but even though there is expectations for a rebound, we aren't expecting growth to really match the year-ago levels. And so that's really the important thing here. And that really mirrors our expectation for the overall economy as a whole, that we're not going to quite match the levels we saw last year, but we are expecting somewhat of a rebound, so to speak, in comparison to early 2019 so far.
Thank you so much. Fantastic stuff. Anthony Smith, ladies and gentlemen. He's moved to the Freight Alley here to help present to us, our market. He's one of our market experts in-house. He's going to start bringing it to you. You're going to get familiar with him as well. So thank you to Dean Croak and Anthony Smith today for taking us all over the country and giving us a general snapshot of some different freight and economic conditions such as they are. We are here for you at 4 o'clock each and every day. We've also developed, besides sharing the general love on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn, we have our own YouTube video channel now, so please be checking that out. Join, subscribe, and share that love as well. And you can find us on FreightWaves.com. All right, so we will see you again tomorrow. Thanks for joining in today. And in the meantime, don't worry, be happy.